Hey, happy Sunday, everyone. Hey, I'm here. It's just me today. My wife is up in Maine. She's at her 9 to 5 right now. She operates her own business, and I'm here with Ryan. He's out of Massachusetts. Ryan, could you tell us a little bit about yourself, man?
Yeah, for sure. So me and Tim know each other. We've known each other for probably it must be 2 months now. I've loved working with Tim, and Tim's been a great guy, and he asked me to come on today to kind of talk about some of the stuff that I might know a little bit better than your average newbie. I'm talking about maybe a little bit of appraisal stuff, so understanding value, and I'm able to talk on that because I was an appraiser for about a year, and had a lot of success with the single family residential side of appraisal. And I did a lot of stuff with estate work and like kind of like written appraisals. So I really enjoyed that, but it was always meant to be a base for coming into investing. So that's kind of where I'm trying to get up to speed now.
I love it. I love it. Yeah. I love when people tell me that they wanted a base foundation
Hmm.
before they jumped into real estate. Mine actually was construction.
Right.
And during my time in construction, I figured out, you know what? I don't want to swing a hammer for the rest of my life.
Hmm.
And then I oddly enough, I came across Rich Dad Poor Dad.
Yep.
Everybody gets their start, Rich Dad Poor Dad, and Bigger Pockets.
Hmm.
Brandon Turner was a big influence. And then we actually met in Sub 2. I'm sure a lot of people by now know what Sub 2 is and who Pace Morby is. Well, I followed Pace Morby for about a year and a half before I took the plunge and met you and the New England Accountability Group,
Yeah.
which is absolutely amazing. Working with Ryan is absolutely amazing. I love working with him. Me and him actually role play, which is just a fancy way of saying that we practice talking to sellers together and different strategies on how to structure deals and overcome objections, things like that. Um, but I really wanted to talk to you today about appraisal work because a lot of our business surrounds appraisals. Like the entire deal structure is based off of what we think things are going to appraise for when the end buyer goes to purchase their home. They get a loan from a traditional bank, and during that process, the property has to be appraised by a local appraiser. If that appraisal comes in something different than what you thought it was, then you're in deep water, right? You could be in deep water if it comes in a lot lower than what you were expecting. You can actually lose money on that deal. Um, so, uh, like, tell me about some of your experiences as being an appraiser and like kind of what that looks like, if you could walk us through it.
Yeah, for sure. So like being an appraiser is definitely an interesting entry point into real estate. Kind of you talked about like there's a lot of different entry points into real estate, and a lot of people get into it through being an agent, a broker. A lot of people get in from the construction side, like you were talking about, but not always do you hear about an appraiser kind of taking that leap. But for me, becoming an appraiser was a good idea because what do you need to know about a property before you're able to actively trade it, right? You
Yeah.
need to know what it's worth. So like if you don't know what it's worth, then you're kind of just shooting in the dark and hoping for the best, and that's fine. It works. I know that it works. But it's gonna give you a much better chance of success if you don't have to go renegotiate, if you don't have to go through finding a buyer is going to be much easier if you know you have a good deal on your hands and you know why, right? So that's kind of the philosophy there. And um, I kind of lost track of your question. What was it that you asked exactly?
Yeah, no worries. It's pretty much like uh, what's like the process? What are some of the things that we
Mm,
need to know about appraisals that could help us in our journey, or where can we find some resources or even tap into you?
yep, for sure. So the way that I look at it is like it's proving the value of a property through a process, right? So you have to have like a recorded process that you took to back up why you think that something is what it is, right? And what happens is you form an opinion of value, right? So you don't like, you're never going to have a spot on idea. You can definitely get pretty close, but it's important to know that you're never going to get the exact number, right? No matter how good you are. You know, sometimes you might get lucky, but the point that I'm trying to make is that the opinion of value, anytime there's an opinion, is there's like a chance for bias. So if you're trying new to getting into this, like that's my first recommendation, is to turn off the bias. So try to figure out, like, is this a really good deal based on like what the data is telling me? Like not what I think, not what I hope, right? Like, is this a good deal based off of facts? And that's like a really important part, because I think a lot of people want to make a deal work and it's not there. So
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I definitely get that. I think just so everybody has like an understanding of what the data means, I think what most people refer to as the data would be the comps, or the comparable sales within a certain radius around the house that you're looking at, right? Whether it's a lot of people say radius, but it's actually like the subdivision or neighborhoods, right? Do I have that about right, or am I missing the mark a little?
Yeah, so basically a comparable sale, to me, I like to start with like a really broad definition of that, and then throughout my process I'll like refine what that actually looks like. So
Yeah.
like I start with like as much information as I can so I don't miss something, because a lot of people just like jump right to like what they think is like the closest comp, the most comparable property in the area, but like you'll miss some things like by setting yourself too big of parameters like too early, or too tight of parameters too early. So what I mean by that is like I will get like a whole bunch of like information about every sold property that's even close, like maybe just like the same style and in the same town, and then I'll work my way down to like square footage maybe, or like maybe I'll start with square footage and then like work my way like through distance. But there's a bunch of these factors that go into it, and you know, honestly, without like a visual, my biggest recommendation would be like straight out of Compton, like from
Oh yeah.
Jamil, because that gives you a really good idea of like the most important things that are going to be like the apples to apples. So that's what you got to figure out, is like the apples to apples, right? Like what actually matters for me to look at, and then to, once you have like a good match, it's like you're never, I mean, you can get pretty close, but like you're never gonna have a perfect match, right? Like you can get like pretty freaking close, especially on like the western side of the country. But over here it's a little bit tougher because like everything's old, and like over there they kind of like to repeat stuff. But the point is that like you're gonna have to make adjustments because it's never gonna be like an identical match. So you have to adjust based on like a bunch of different factors. And Jamil's YouTube, whatever, that has the information
Yeah.
for what you'd be looking at.
Yeah, that's a great point. So Jamil Damji on YouTube, he's an influencer. He's great friends with Pace Morby. He does a series called Straight Outta Compton, which you're talking about right now. It's Comp In. If you type in Compton, you get the music video. So don't do that. Do Compin. Compin. Great information. Yeah, he goes really nuts to bolts on how to actually comp properties. I've been curious, like in your experience up here in New England, just a little bit of background for everybody else. If you're on a different part of the country, it's not as old, right? The homes traditionally are not as old as they are in places like New England, where the country was founded. So like I have a 4-unit apartment right now that was built originally in the 1850s. So you go in and you have rough sawn lumber, hand hewn rough sawn lumber, like as its foundation, as the actual framing of the house, these large timbers. My question for you is so in from what you've seen, Like, is there a drastic difference in prices between a 2022 home and an 1850s home? I think I know the answer, but like, have you seen traditionally a difference?
So I mean, obviously it would be based on like a variety of factors, but just the difference of age is not
Yeah,
something I adjust for.
so that's something you
So
adjust for. Okay.
yeah, yeah. So there, I
Okay.
don't apply any sort of adjustment to that. You know, if you get towards the end of your process and you're starting to see um, adjusted sales prices that don't make sense, that might be something I look at, like to see if they're like just like that might be the reason why that the up prices are off. But other than that, I won't start there. Pretty rarely is that like actually a value thing
That's interesting.
over
Yeah,
here at least.
that's super interesting. So that's opposite of what I thought. So I was thinking that there would be a drastic difference, but you're saying it's comparables. It's what the market is telling you, because that's what the comparables are. It's actually people buying these houses, having them appraised, and this is what the market is going to handle. You're not going to find super well in 2021. Maybe you found super drastic differences between appraisals and prices where people were buying, but typically, like that's they commingle, right? As
So
far as like the value, the actual value where it's appraised at and where people are going to buy it at.
yeah, so when it comes to age, I just want to touch on this. When it comes to
Oh yeah, yeah,
age, like the process where you're selecting comparable properties, if a house is from 1850, like there's a decent chance that that house is going to look dramatically different than like a brand new build. So like at the end of the day, the age isn't the thing that actually matters. It's more of like the overall like style of the building. And those are probably going to come out through the process anyway. So that
yeah.
everything that's left is it, like the age of it is not like a huge factor because we've already kind of hit that somewhere else.
That's such a great point. This is actually one of the things that I'm struggling to improve on is my ability to comp. So like, is really that's really interesting. That's that that's part of your process is weeding that out. It's not the eggs. It's that exactly. It's the style, or it's the same like style as the other houses that are selling around it.
Yeah, and this is kind of what I was talking about with like checking yourself of bias for bias, like the entire
Yeah,
process. It's like, okay, like, yeah, I have this assumption about what may be a thing that is adjustable, but like what is the actual reason for that? Like why do I think that? And then, you know, at the end, when you see the result, you can then like compare like what you thought your value was, right? Compared to what it actually ended up being. And then if it's dramatically different, you can say, okay, well what went wrong? So that's kind of like how you start to build that up. And another good way of getting educated on this, besides becoming like going to appraisal courses and becoming an appraiser, would be like work with an end buyer and really understand why he thinks something's a deal or what kind of deals he's looking for and why that makes sense. And
yeah.
that's a good way to back into it. I know Pace always talks about like if you were really starting from scratch, it's like go find an end buyer and like find out what he wants, right? Because that's going to be your fastest way to understand value.
And in this case, in terms of what we do, in buyer would probably be a fix and flipper. If you're real estate investing, you're trying to figure out the comps, you would find a fix and flipper because they know what their end buyer would be, which is an actual homeowner that's going to purchase the house after they fix it up. Is that kind of what you mean, or would you actually try and find end buyers?
No, I mean, I would challenge that and try to like have you understand or try to understand people, have people understand like in general, like the different kind of buyers. Because if you
Yeah,
box yourself into the mindset of a house being just a fix and flip, you're going to like limit yourself pretty dramatically. If you understand like you know,
yeah.
a buy and hold versus a flip, the value is completely different. It can be completely different.
Okay.
So that's an important thing to understand here is that like the as is value is just one like aspect of the overall equation. Like, you know, the everybody talks about the ARV, but really, I mean, I think, you know, you want to understand what it's worth like in its current condition, because then once you understand what it's worth, it's in its current condition, you can keep it there, right? Like who says
Yeah.
that you always need to go to this after repair value? I mean, a lot of the times you do, and that's how it works. But
Yeah.
like, don't limit yourself by only thinking that way, because if you can keep it as is, there might still be a deal there.
I love it. I love that. I love that you said that because, yeah, I mean, I guess I was putting myself into a box, right? I was limiting my exit strategy. Because you're right. There is a difference between somebody who's going to buy this as a rental, somebody who's going to fix and flip it. And then there's other strategies that involve doing a wrap, which we can get into wraps later, but that's where you actually find an end buyer and have them pay you payments to you. So the value there is different even than a fix and flipper who's going to a homeowner who's going to sell it to a homeowner later, or somebody who's going to buy and hold. So that's a really great point. I actually didn't think about it that way.
Yeah, that's a big thing for me, because like, um, you know, in my position, I feel like my strongest ability is like understanding the value. So like if somebody needs to have something sold, then it's like, all right, well, I'm gonna find somebody who might work for that for you, right? Like, so that's
Yeah.
a thing that you can do in this business. Is the other side is not just acquisitions, but it's like finding a buyer. And in order to find a good buyer, you need to understand what you have.
Yeah, that's so true. That's so true. It's strategy. It's the entire strategy of this business. It's something that it's going to take a long time to learn. For me personally, I'm pretty new to the game still, so it's like talking to somebody like you. This is why I like having these conversations, because it opens up your mind more, because there's more way to skin a cat than just one, right? Everybody's going to have their own typical or their own perception of how it could be done, or their own idea of how it could be done, rather, which is extremely important. Um,
Yeah. And so to that point, at my appraisal firm that I worked at, there were two kind of like they were partners, and I did work under pretty much one exclusively for probably 6 to 7 months, and then I started looking for more work from the other partner as well, like in tandem. And I remember the first appraisal that I did for him, he sat me down and like reamed me out, because he was like, "Dude, what are you doing? This thing sucks." And I was like, "I don't know, man. Like, this is what Mark's been having me do, and he's quite happy with it. So, um, how would you like me to do it?" And it was a completely different style, right? Like, and the number at the end ended up being kind of close, right? Like on both
yeah,
sides of the equation, but how they like to back up their opinion is just completely different. So I want to point that out, because the thing that really matters is that they both have a process. Right.
yeah,
And that's the thing that matters, is as long as you have a process that you can check, you can go back and check and say, hey, what went wrong? Right? Then the end product does not matter as much.
and that's an important point as well. That you just made me think of this. It's something I found out whenever I actually bought my first home. Was uh, the the appraisal process that the bank had, because they go to local appraisals, local appraisers, right? And I've heard that each appraiser has their own process of doing it, and it could be dramatically different. Like, this appraiser looks for this. There are some appraisers that are more strict, and if they go into a property and they see that there are certain damages, some will be more lenient to that, and some will be more stringent and make you go back and fix those, or have whoever is selling the home fix those before they'll sign off on the appraisal. Like, so how, I guess my point is, how important is it, or would it be beneficial if people found some of the appraisers in their local market and developed relationships with them, and kind of figured out what appraisers in their local market look for, or how their process is. Would that kind of benefit people?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, understanding how appraisers thinks is definitely going to get you there. I mean, pretty much at the end of the day, like an appraiser is going to do something that's overkill compared to what's needed to get a wholesale deal done, in kind of like a not so subtle way. I mean, there's a lot that goes into an appraisal that's not going to go into understanding just like an offer number from an as is value, but like um you could definitely, I think recently I got an email about an appraiser meetup. And there are plenty of opportunities like that you could take advantage of and just go and like rub elbows with people who understand value. The same could be said about like investor meetups. Just go and talk about value and why and why and why. And that's what it comes down to, really, at the end of the day.
That's interesting. That I actually didn't know that there were appraiser meetups. Like, that's super interesting. Like, where would, like, could I find an appraisal meetup?
Yeah, you can definitely check. I mean, for me, the section of like appraisers that I got my education from, I believe they're the ones who sent out the email. They only operate in Mass and Rhode Island, but I'm sure that there's some like local like educators of appraisal that you could get in touch with, and they would probably have some information about maybe whatever meetups are there. And if they don't have one, I mean, what's stopping you from saying, can we try to hold one? Can we try to host one? Do you think that would be a good idea? Worst case scenario, they say no, right? Best case
Yeah,
scenario, you're the guy who set it up, and everybody's going to talk to you. So
yeah. And one thing I've done in the past is, I mean, I've gotten appraisals. Let's say, for instance, my first apartment. I got an appraisal on that just to see what type of finishes, if we were to put it back on the market, like what type of finishes would be optimal here, as far as like kitchen countertops. What are buyers looking for? Um, and I paid for that, and I was able to meet the appraiser and kind of pick his brain about what they were looking for in evaluation. We're actually going to have to go through that evaluation because we're doing the Burr method. So during the refinancing process is when we'll go through an appraisal. So that's kind of why I did that. But that's another way I've found to just develop that relationship a little bit, especially if you're buying in the market. Like, inevitably you're going to bring them business, even though it's the bank hiring them.
exactly, there's a lot more to appraisals than just working with banks. There's just like how they're with agents specialize in certain kinds of real estate, single family, multifamily, commercial. There are appraisers who do the same thing. So the firm that I was at did Fenway Park in Boston, which was pretty cool. To actually get hired to check out Fenway and figure out what that thing was worth was pretty cool. And there, and my direct supervisor and boss, he specialized in gas stations, so in doing gas stations. And then my kind of specialty had been, while I was there, kind of estate work. So pretty much like if somebody passes away, evaluating the property so that it can get passed along properly. That's kind of where I found myself. So I wasn't usually working with a bank or something like that. It would be more like lawyers and things like that. So that's kind of where a lot of people don't realize is like there is like a variety of appraisers, and just because like you're an appraiser doesn't mean that you exactly know how to do every kind of property.
That's pretty cool. I actually, I mean, logically, after you saying that, it's like, oh, well, of course there's going to be appraisers for everything,
Hmm.
because everything needs to have a value, and it needs to be standard across the board, or as standard as it can whenever you're talking about individual people. I think, out of curiosity, like, what do you know, like, what kind of goes into doing something as big as Fenway Park? Do you have like an army of appraisers that go out, or is it like a percentage that you have to inspect or anything like that?
Yeah. So my boss, Mark, he's been like his grandfather started this company, and then his father was an appraiser his entire life, and Mark has been an appraiser for like 40 years now. So he has like an immense amount of experience, and goes that goes a long way in the appraisal industry. Having experience really like goes a long way in understanding certain things. Um, because at the end of the day, it is that opinion, right? And if your opinion's really seasoned, then that is one of the strongest factors that you can have. Um, so I know that it was probably like a very lengthy process, um, like, multiple months worth of like data collection, and then just comparing it to like basically with something like that, you would probably take like some sort of like cost approach, and then adjust for deterioration and like dilapidation.
Yeah,
Um, that and then working with Fenway to collect all the information on its construction, and understanding the cost value, right? Because there's three ways to go about valuing real estate, right? There's the sales comparison approach, which everybody talks about, especially in wholesaling. That's kind of the only way people operate. And then there's the income approaches, which is evaluating property based off the income that can produce. And then the third one is cost. So like, what did it cost to build this, and how long has it taken, or how much would it have deteriorated since then, without any updates? So those are kind of like the three ways that you go about it. So I would say probably it'd be a combination between like a going concern, which is um, which is the value based on the business that it is, and then the cost approach, which would be like the actual cost of construction, and then using those to kind of come to a determination of what it might be worth. But I would say probably primarily like weighted on the going concern, because that thing's a moneymaker.
yeah, wow. um I mean, that makes a lot of sense. I actually, and it's funny, it's these conversations that make me think about this stuff, is like, okay, like that makes a lot of sense, like determining the actual building, how much it costs to build. But then something like Fenway Park that brings in a ton of money, it's like that doesn't make sense for that, right?
Hmm.
Because it's an actual business. It's not
Right.
just a home. It's not just a house where somebody's living in it. You're not making money off it. It's a business. So determining that value is got to be different,
It's
as far as,
usually a good bit
yeah.
higher.
Oh, I bet.
Yeah.
Jesus. So that's really cool. Uh, so I think, so going back to the appraisal process in general, I had a question. I'm trying to remember the question now. Uh, oh, so my question was, this is why I interrupt people all the time, is because I forget my questions really quickly. So the question that I had, I feel like it's an important question, because if an appraisal comes back low, or what somebody thinks is low, is there a process that they can do, or they can go through to refute that, or say, hey, I think that was a bit low. Did you check this, this, and this? Is there a process for that?
So if an appraisal comes back low, is there a way to ask the appraiser what they did to get there? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, yeah, or just say, or get another appraiser's opinion, and kind of compare the two. Is there?
Well, yeah, if you want to pay for another appraisal, but they run you about like $700 right now, at least around here for like a simple one.
Yeah,
Um, so like, no, I don't think that's worth it. I think you can ask like, how did you get there? And you can kind of say like, hey, did you think about this, or did you think about that? And generally like when that happened to me, like I would entertain the idea a little bit, but then at the end of the day, like if I felt my opinion was stronger, I'd just say, you know what, like, you have a lot of bias in the situation. You're pushing for a price, and I just can't see it. So
Okay.
that's kind of, the mentality. It's not like I'm a dick and I'm not trying to like just bulldoze you. There might be some guys like that out there. I don't know. I mean, there's always
Yeah.
rotten apple, but for the most part, I think people are pretty logical about it.
Okay. Um, yeah. So, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. I was just, I've heard in the past that, depending on where you are in the country, appraisers can see things a lot differently. Around here, it's a bit more rural, so appraisers have to come from all over the state. Um, uh, I think my appraiser had to drive an hour and a half out here to get out here because there's so few appraisers. And then somebody who's coming from Hanover and sees a lot of different types of properties might see it a little bit differently, or view the comparables a little bit differently. But it sounds like, I mean, uh, y'all are pretty close in your evaluations, anyways, as far as appraiser to appraiser.
Yeah, appraisers around here have to have kind of different opinions because it's based on the
Yeah.
data that you have. Um, so if it is like a more rural area like that, then like the opinion can like kind of like do this a lot more because
Yeah.
there's less data, so that the level the amount of opinion that's involved is much higher. So
Okay.
that's what would like cause like a lot more of like a difference in value when there is a lot of data available, and it's a lot of like comparable data. Then it's you're not going to see nearly as much variation because the amount of opinion that's involved is very low.
Okay.
Because you're getting the same information as everybody else, and if all that information is there, then it's a lot easier to come to a conclusion.
That makes a lot of sense. So I think the moral of this story is you have to do your homework, especially whenever you're going into this business. I mean, it's best to find the end buyers, see what the comparables are, and get as close as you can. I know last year was extremely difficult because appraisers were coming in a lot lower than the actual comps because people were buying houses $50,000 to $100,000 over asking price. $100,000 is out there, but I have heard of $100,000 over asking price. So in times like that, it's a little bit more challenging whenever the market is going up so quickly. But now it seems like it's kind of panned out a little bit. So just do your research, find your local appraisers, start gaining relationships. Just there are people who know the answers to these questions, especially it's market dependent. So yeah, I think that's the moral of the story. All right. So you were an appraiser. What are you doing now, and what does your business look like now?
So for now, I'm just getting started with the wholesale thing, trying to get that running, and so far I've tried a few different things, but it's been almost there's almost too many ways, too many paths to follow, and I've finally fallen into what I think is going to give me the best chance, which is kind of just like calling only specifically like probate prospects and getting really good and specialized at handling their problems and going down that route. And it looks very promising.
I love it. I love it. So the name of my channel is Niche List. So it's so what you're doing is exactly what I want to do, is get really, really niche down. Niche. Some people probably don't know what niche is. Uh, most people do, but niche is very specific. Getting down to a very specific list and going after those people, especially if you're in a more competitive market and you don't have a lot of money to go after 3,000 people, 3,000 house list every single month, and you want to, you want to go after like 20, 30 people. and really niche down on them and find the information that other people aren't finding. So that's really cool. I like that you're going that direction. I mean, you had a conversation about this the other day, so that's really cool. And for everyone starting, I mean, this is it. This is where the rubber meets the road. Is like you have to figure out how you want to run your business, and you have to figure out the basics. Figure out what list you're going for. Figure out what market you're in. That's probably the most difficult thing for me, is figuring out which market I actually want to end in, and not do what I did at the beginning and pick like 5 cities over the entire state, but figure out what county I want to be in, and 1 or 2 cities I want to go after, and then really figure out those cities as far as what are the comps going in certain neighborhoods, what are the median home values, going after those. So niche list it's like mindset and niche list are my top two. So that's really good. That's really cool, and good luck with starting up. um yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be fun to continue on this journey and figure out as we go. That's, kind of the fun part for me is just figuring it out as I'm going.
I love it. I love it. So what I want to do in 6 months, 6 months, a year, whatever it turns out to be, I want to get back on this and see where you're at with your business, and like have a side by side comparable to, oh, I'm just starting out, figuring out exactly what leads I want to go after. I have maybe 1 or 2 or 3 deals under my belt, and like 6 months down the road, I'm running a $500,000 business a year, or $1 million business a year. What does it look like? So that would be really cool if you're down for that.
Yeah, definitely would be down for that.
I love it. I love it. Well, Ryan, thank you for being on here. I know you're sick today. It was really, really cool speaking with you, man. Um, if anybody wants to reach out to you, do you have a place that somebody could reach out to you if they want to do business with you, if they're in Massachusetts and they want to bring you a deal or something like that? Like, is there a place that people could reach out to you?
Yeah, the best place would be probably just Facebook. Find me on Facebook. My name is Ryan Ericco, Errico, and you can just reach out to me there, and then we can go from there. So that's the best way to do that. And if you have any more questions, deeper questions about this, um, feel free to hit me up.
I love it. I love it. All right, guys. This is Niche List. All right. So if you got value out of this, share it. Share it with everybody else. I'm gonna have more. Tell me in the comments what you want to see next, and I'll find somebody who does that. Hit the like button, subscribe. See you in the next video. I love y'all. Later, guys.